Judge Mayfield was known for her stern decisions, and people would often say she was as hard as stone. She was fair most days, but held strong to her opinions, which at times clouded her judgment. She had built a reputation as a no-nonsense woman. One brisk Monday morning, the courtroom door swung open, and with it, people shuffled in. Today's case wasn't a big one, at least, not in the eyes of Judge Mayfield. She scanned her docket to see the name Aaron Blake. The man was being fined for allegedly damaging property in one of the upscale neighborhoods. Judge Mayfield quickly flipped through the file. Aaron was described by the complainant, property manager Mr. Carlson, as intimidating and troublesome. As she lifted her head, her eyes narrowed when she saw Aaron walk into the room. There was a calmness to him, a quiet confidence, but Judge Mayfield had already formed her opinion. She thought he was no different from other troublemakers who would do all they could to get themselves wriggled out of any responsibility. As Aaron took his place at the defendant's table, Judge Mayfield cleared her throat and looked him in the eye. "Mr. Blake, I hope you realize that's no small charge. You have indeed been accused of property damage in an extremely strictly regulated area." She started, and Aaron began calmly, his tone polite and composed. "Your Honor, I believe there must be some misunderstanding," because they understand he was saying respectfully, but Judge Mayfield wasn't buying any of it. "I see no misunderstanding here. The evidence speaks for itself," she said, firm but calm. "You are to pay a fine of $110,000 to cover the damages." Aaron's brow furrowed slightly, but he remained respectful. "Your Honor, with all due respect, I'd like the opportunity to explain. I had permission to be on the property for work, and I did not cause any damage." Judge Mayfield scoffed. "Permission for what exactly, Mr. Blake? Are you suggesting you were there for legitimate business?" "Yes, Your Honor," Aaron replied patiently. "I was there to investigate a case for my work with the Department of Justice." Judge Mayfield's expression changed for a brief second, but she quickly hid her surprise. "The Department of Justice," she repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, Your Honor, I'm a federal prosecutor, Aaron," she said, holding his gaze. The courtroom hushed, a few gasped, and even the clerk paused mid-note. Judge Mayfield's eyes widened, just a little, before narrowing once more. She wasn't about to allow her authority to slip. "Well, Mr. Blake," she said, her voice, "I see that does not change the fact that you are here today, facing a fine. Irregardless of your occupation, you are not above the law." Aaron nodded. "I understand, Your Honor. Fully believe in justice and fairness, which is why I'd like to bring forward evidence clearing my name. May I present my documents?" Judge Mayfield huffed, but waved her hand for him to proceed. Aaron opened his briefcase and handed a file to his attorney, who approached the judge's bench. As she flipped through the papers, her face grew a little paler. The documents were signed approvals, clearly showing that Aaron had been granted access to the property for an official investigation. Judge Mayfield's grip on the file tightened, but she wasn't ready to admit her mistake. "Regardless of these papers, Mr. Blake, you seem to have disregarded common courtesy. Were you not aware of the neighborhood's concern for their property?" Aaron remained calm. "Your Honor, my work was handled respectfully. I can also provide witnesses who can testify to that." The judge hesitated, glancing at the courtroom. As murmurs rose, she could feel the gaze of the spectators, curious about what she would do next, but she refused to back down easily. "This court will recess briefly," she announced. "I'll need time to review this new information." Aaron gave a slight nod, maintaining his respectful stance, but as Judge Mayfield left the room, he couldn't help but wonder what kind of justice he would receive. The truth was on his side, but would it be enough against someone as stubborn as Judge Mayfield? In the hallway, whispers filled the air. People who had come in to watch a simple case were now intrigued. "Did you hear?" someone whispered. "He's a federal prosecutor. This judge is about to be embarrassed big time." Yet as Aaron sat down outside the courtroom, he simply waited, knowing that the truth would come to light one way or another. After a brief recess, Judge Mayfield entered the courtroom, her face stern, unreadable. She sat, shuffled some papers, then lifted her gaze to his with a steady regard. A flicker of unease darted through her eyes. The spectators moved forward in their chairs as a signal that something was moving beneath her staid features. "Mr. Blake," Judge Mayfield started, "I have gone over the documents that you filed, but I am not quite convinced." She looked down at the paperwork, then up at him. "There are still a few questions left unanswered." Aaron, who had remained impassive, nodded respectfully. "I understand, Your Honor. If there's anything I can clarify, I'm here to answer." Judge Mayfield hesitated, as if weighing her words. "While you've provided proof of permission, the property owner, Mr. Carlson, insists that you caused significant damage during your investigation. I don't take accusations of proper damage lightly, especially in a neighborhood as prestigious as Riverstone Gardens." She leaned back, studying him as if daring him to respond. Aaron took a breath, staying calm but firm. "Your Honor, I'd like to call on too. I had witnesses present with me that day, and they can confirm no damage occurred. In fact, Mr. Carlson wasn't even on the property when we arrived. My investigation was routine, authorized, and properly documented." Judge Mayfield's lips tightened, and the room grew tense with anticipation. The idea of calling witnesses seemed reasonable to everyone else, but to her felt like a challenge, one she was unwilling to allow, not when she had already made up her mind. Yet, in a court where spectators watched, and Aaron's, it was as clear as crystal that she had little choice but to proceed very cautiously as a federal prosecutor. "Very well," she sighed, masking her frustration. "You may call your witnesses." The first witness was a young woman named Lisa Bennett, one of Aaron's team members, who stood confidently in the witness box. She spoke clearly, relating how careful they had been on the property and how professionally they had conducted themselves. She told them how they had documented every part of the investigation, even taking pictures to ensure no allegations of damage could be made against them. When Lisa finished, Judge Mayfield leaned forward. "And you are prepared to swear that no damage occurred whatsoever?" she asked pointedly. "Yes, Your Honor," Lisa replied without hesitation. "I was there the entire time." Aaron's attorney then called a second witness, an older man named Frank Woods, who was a longtime investigator with years of experience working on similar cases. He too confirmed that Aaron had acted professionally and with respect for the property, and that no one from Mr. Carlson's staff had been present to observe any alleged damage. Judge Mayfield leaned back in her chair. The weight of evidence was clearly against her original judgment, and the courtroom knew it. Yet instead of acknowledging such, she began questioning the witnesses further, almost as if she hoped to catch them in a misstep. But each answer from Lisa and Anank only helped reinforce Aaron's innocent plea. As the questioning continued, Mr. Carlson, the property owner, entered the room. He acted nervous but had his chin held high, ready to support his claims against Aaron. Once on the witness stand, he launched into a heated testimony, stating that had seen photos of damage, that his property was well maintained, and that he couldn't afford to let just anyone trample over his investment. Aaron's attorney stepped forward, showing a calm confidence. "Mr. Carlson, could you tell us what sort of damage you observed firsthand?" Mr. Carlson stammered, his gaze shifting uncomfortably. "Well, I didn't actually see it myself, but my assistant said." "Your assistant?" The attorney cut in, raising his eyebrows. "Is your assistant here today to confirm this?" Mr. Carlson cleared his throat. "No, not here today, but they showed me photos, and I trust them completely." The attorney nodded thoughtfully. "So you're basing your testimony on secondhand information without having observed the damage yourself?" Mr. Carlson's face reneged him, saying there was damage, and someone has to pay for it. Aaron's attorney calmly continued, "Mr. Carlson, are you aware that Mr. Blake was there on an official investigation with permission from both your management companies and the Department of Justice?" Mr. Carlson's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The room was silent, all eyes on him as he finally managed, I wasn't aware of that, no." The judge visibly looked uncomfortable, the truth now clearly fitting into place. The whole courtroom was slowly starting to realize that not only was there a lack of proof against Aaron, but indeed, this case had been full of assumptions. It was then that Judge Mayfield realized how her judgment was crumbling. Her face grew tense as she cleared her throat, addressing the courtroom with an authoritative tone. "I have heard enough," she said, fighting to hold herself together. "Mr. Blake, I'm sorry for the misunderstanding and misjudgment. Based on the evidence and testimonies brought forth, the case against you lacks merit. You are free to go. The charges are dismissed." Aaron nodded respectfully. "Thank you, Your Honor." But just as Judge Mayfield was about to adjourn the court, Aaron's attorney spoke up. "Your Honor, given the nature of this case, would like to request that Mr. Carlson be investigated for making false claims, sans substantial evidence that wasted the time of this court and unfairly blemished my client's name." A murmur ran across the court, and Judge Mayfield stopped, paled. Indeed, it was a turn in the tables, and the tables would now turn on the accuser of Aaron. Surprised by the request, Judge Mayfield hesitated. She turned to Mr. Carlson, who was panicked, shifting in his seat as he watched in horror at the weight of his own accusations. Clearing her throat, Judge Mayfield nodded slowly. Mr. Carlson, due to the circumstance and in the light of evidence given, I must agree that your actions are worth investigating further. Accusing somebody without sufficient proof, especially when they are on official duty, is no light matter. Carlson's face turned pale. Your Honor, I didn't mean to. I just thought. But Judge Mayfield raised her hand to stop him. Belief without evidence has no place in this courtroom, Mr. Carlson. You brought these charges under false pretenses, and you wasted the time of this court and the reputation of a federal prosecutor. Aaron watched silently, his face composed but resolute. He had come to court prepared to defend himself, but hadn't expected justice to swing so quickly and clearly in his favor. With a final glance at Aaron, Judge Mayfield made her decision. I will be filing a recommendation to the District Attorney's Office to investigate Mr. Carlson for making fraudulent claims against a federal officer. Additionally, any costs Mr. Blake incurred for legal representation will be paid by Mr. Carlson. This court is adjourned. The gavel fell, and it was a closed case. The courtroom began emptying quickly. Whispers filled the air as onlookers nudged one another, each in amazement at the sudden and unexpected turn of events. Aaron gathered his belongings. Quiet relief reflected in his countenance. He gave his attorney a nod. His attorney clapped him on his shoulder with a grin as they exited the courtroom. Aaron couldn't help but smile. Justice had spoken louder than bias today, and he had been vindicated, all with dignity intact. Outside the courthouse, a small crowd of onlookers and reporters had gathered, intrigued by the case's unexpected turn. One of the reporters called out to him, Mr. Blake, any comment on the judge's decision? Aaron paused, looking out over the crowd. Justice was served, he said simply. Sometimes the truth needs only a little light to shine through. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving behind a courtroom where a lesson had been learned, a judge humbled and a man's honor restored. This brings us to the end of the story. Thank you for watching till, and last but not least, I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, don't forget to like the video and share it with your friends as well. Subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell for more intriguing stories. Have a great day.